If you were a professional tour player and you wanted to improve and you wanted to know how good you were relative to the field, you'd have an entire archive of shot link data that would show you exactly what you needed to work on in order for you to score better and ultimately win more events. But what if you're a regular weekend competitor, say a 14 handicap? How do you know exactly what you need to do in order to compete with the people in the next flight group of yours that are maybe 9 handicaps? Today, we're going to look at Arccos' new app update, and it involves a strokes gain tool that will allow you to look at how good you are compared to pretty much any handicap out there. Let's do it right meow. Thank you very much for tuning in to my YouTube channel. My name is Kenny. Some of you may know me as Kennie Kat. I am a competitive golfer, and this channel is dedicated to my journey on what it takes to become a better competitive golfer. If this is your first time joining the channel, I do release videos every single Tuesday and Friday. And if you do happen to like this content, the best compliment you can pay me is a thumbs up and a subscribe below. Let's talk about the Arccos stat tracking app, because I think this new update is so exciting that it's now rolled out to the mass user base, and I want to go through my strokes gain stats with you live. Well, not live, but I want to go through them with you for the first time so we can take a look at what my stats show and how valuable this information is going to be in order to help me become a better competitive golfer. So right away we can see that after the 12,000 plus shots that it's collected of me, that's a lot of shots. Holy smokes, Kenny, you play a lot of golf. So my current handicap is 7.4. Did not know that. I thought I was closer to a 9, but yay, handicap's dropping. Always good to see that. So it gives the ability to compare your ability to score to whatever handicap that you want to look at, and it goes all the way to a tour player up into the plus handicaps, all the way down to a 20 handicap. So if you're a competitive golfer, you probably have the ability to compare yourself to pretty much anybody out there. So I'm going to go ahead, and since I'm a 7, we're just going to compare myself to a scratch handicapper because I want to know. And it's also going to give you the ability to select how many rounds you want to compare it to. I always like to look at my last 20 rounds because you want as much data as possible. So we can quickly see that my comparison to a scratch golfer is I'm losing 10 strokes on average to a scratch handicap golfer. I'm losing 3 strokes on driving, 3.9 strokes on the approach, almost a full stroke in my short game, and I'm losing about 2.3 strokes in putting. And then from there, we've got our top 3 insights, and it tells you what to work on. So it looks like where I'm losing the most strokes is shots from the fairway. It looks like distance versus accuracy. What do you know? Sounds like a video I may have done a week or 2 ago. I'm losing 1.8 strokes on driving accuracy because of penalties off the tee. That is something that I definitely knew of. And then approach by pin distance. We talked about this in my other video, accuracy versus distance, that being accurate from inside of 150 yards is pretty much guaranteed if you're going to be a good player. Those are wedge and scoring shots. You just need to be good from those distances. And then it also talks a little bit about what's helping me. So I've got a good lag putting. My chipping is pretty good, but as everyone should know about my lens, and if you don't know, my short game is the strongest part of my game. And then it gives you a trend analysis of every round you've played, and you can kind of go in and do a little breakdown of how well or how good you did on every single round. And as you can see, my most recent tournament, I shot a 93. Don't worry, we'll get to that one later, because that's an interesting story, and it's not really that interesting. I just played very terribly. But we'll do a recap. I'm not hiding it, I'm just behind my videos. And then it also gives you a scoring analysis, which I think is very interesting because you can see how good you score on par 3s, par 4s, and par 5s, and you can see how good you are relative to the handicap that you have selected to compare yourself to. All right, we're gonna open up the app, and I'm gonna go ahead and compare myself to a 3 handicap because that is roughly 5 strokes from where I currently am. Now, right away, it's a lot more digestible than comparing myself to a scratch player. 10 strokes is, that could be anywhere. But looking at comparing myself in small little increments of where I want to go is exactly where this is the most valuable tool. So now we can see that there's only 6 or so strokes that I have to shave in order to get to my target goal of being able to score with 3 handicap in tournament play. So the first thing we're going to do is, it's telling us right away that the biggest area for improvement is going to be our approach game. We're losing almost 3 strokes there, so let's figure out what it is in our approach game that we could be improving to get to that target goal. And then it gives you a little highlight of your recent rounds, which is just kind of like a nice little snapshot, and that's great. It tells you where you're trending. I'm gaining strokes gained over my last 20 rounds in this area, so I am improving. I just need to figure out exactly where I need to improve most. All right, I love this, approach by pin distance. So this was another thing we talked about in my video where I broke down the professional stats from certain distances. So from 100 to 150, I'm losing about 1.2 strokes. And this is the majority of my shots. So that really is only 3 clubs. That's a sand wedge, a gap wedge, and a pitching wedge. Those are the distances I'm going to be using for that. So those are areas that I am going to focus on a lot more and being a lot more accurate with those. And that's actually something that I've already been adding into my game. So I would say these stats are 100% spot on. Where I'm a little excited about these numbers is that my 200+ yard attempts, I'm only losing half a stroke there. So I'd say I'm doing pretty good in that category. And also the 150 to 200 range, which is going to be a 9-iron to a 6-iron now for me, which is also the second half of the shots that I make. I'm doing pretty good in those categories. And then it also gives us approach by terrain. So when the ball's on the tee versus when the ball's in the rough or in the sand. The biggest thing that stands out here is, again, my shots from the fairway. Because so many of them are happening with the scoring clubs, I'm not getting as close as possible. I'm losing a lot of strokes from the fairway. So we just need to make sure that we get better with those clubs, and I'm confident that these numbers are going to drop. Something that does stand out to me is off the tee is pretty good. So par 3 approaches are pretty good, and I'm actually not that bad out of the sand when I have to shoot an approach shot out of the sand or the rough. So those are good pluses. We just need to focus overall on making sure that we can get as close to the hole as possible. Now the final one we've talked about before, greens in regulation. I'm averaging 44% of greens in regulation over the last 20 rounds. That number has gone up to 50%, but ultimately, we went through that in the video. We got to pick smart targets on the green, but I do love the fact that I have a pretty good dispersion of left, right, and long, which means that I'm picking smart targets. The ones that I'm leaving short are just due to poor strike. So as strike improves and as we continue to get better with striking the ball, we should get better with hitting our target. Average distance to the pin, we talked about this. At the end of the day, how close you are in your first putt is ultimately going to determine how much you're likely to score and how likely you are to avoid bogeys. So when I hit the green, using smart targets, compared to a 3 handicap, I am closer. Where we desperately need to improve is what happens when we miss the green. And I suspect that the fact that my misses are 63 feet on average, looking at this chart, knowing that I have an even dispersion of left, right, and long, is probably because I'm striking some and leaving them short. So strike is king. We got to improve strike. But the big takeaway from the approach game is we've got to work on our wedges and our full swing wedges inside of 150 to 100 yards. So let's look at the driving, because there's 2.1 strokes I'm losing here on average compared to a 3 handicap. I'm taking on average 2 penalty strokes per round. That has to stop. The ball has to stay in play, and that is the biggest thing that I am seeing from the strokes gained driving. And I've started to understand this myself because in the last couple of tournaments I've played, I've had way more penalty shots than are acceptable. With good tee selection and just confidence off the tee, there's no reason that I need to be hitting balls out of bounds. So that's the biggest takeaway from here. But let's go a little bit further. Distance off the tee is within 10 yards of where 3 handicap is, and this includes all par 4s and 5s. So this is probably an average of driver, 3-wood, hybrid, 4-iron, etc., etc. So overall, I think we're on the right track here. I am gaining more speed. We just got to make sure we strike the ball more solidly and get our average distance off the tee up to 250 yards. That should be pretty easy to do, and I'm probably already there in the last 5 or 6 rounds. Driving accuracy. So we're right on the money here. 3 handicap hits about 50% of their fairways. I am currently hitting 50% of my fairways. Missing equally left and right, which means that I'm choosing a smart target. Now, this one here is something that's interesting because I know there's a whole adage and there's a lot of cliche of like, oh, eliminate one side of the course. You don't eliminate one side of the course. You eliminate one miss. My big miss is right. I don't ever hook the ball left with the driver. Most of my shots are going to miss right. So the fact that I have an equal miss on the left and on the right tells me that I am aiming properly off the tee with my drives. I just need to make sure that I stop hitting balls out of bounds. I know that sounds easier said than done, but it's just like, Kenny, man, you can't take penalty shots off the tee. It's not necessary. But it goes a little bit further and it tells you where you are losing most of your strokes by hole length. And I think we have an idea as to where I might be losing some of those penalty shots. So it looks like from the 350 to 400 yard distance, which is going to be about a par 4, I'm losing about a stroke on average per round. And I suspect that it's two things. 5.5 shots on average are from this distance, but I also think that because the longer distances, I'm not also losing a stroke. In the shorter distance, I'm not losing a stroke. Or not losing as many strokes. I think the reason why those penalties are happening is because I'm getting way too aggressive on 350 to 400 yard holes. If I'm hitting a driver on these holes, that's just way too much club. I can easily make par on a 350 to 400 yard hole with a 4-iron or even with the hybrid. Being too aggressive and hitting to too tight of areas on par 4s that are way too short to be hitting 3-wood and driver. So I'm going to focus on being really smart and being really strategic when a hole is under 400 yards. Sometimes it may just make more sense to lay up. I can hit a hybrid 230 yards, so now we've got more speed. We can use a more accurate club on those shorter holes and then work on that approach game to use our sand wedge and our gap wedge and our pitch wedge to get us close. Driving hole by shape, I don't really think there's much here in this. I don't shape my driver both ways, so I don't think there's much there. Most of the best drivers in the world only hit their driver one shape. So let's just move on to back to the overall game, take a look at what else we can learn to save some strokes and get to my target goal by the end of the year. So as you can see, my putting's been getting a little shaky as of lately, but that's okay. We all have ups and downs. And then this is interesting. It gives you your putting hot streak. I've never thought about a putting hot streak? Yeah, but that's interesting. Like, it tells you if you're hot or if you're cold based off of the hole you play. Maybe there's something in that data. I mean, maybe they found something that was like players were getting really hot by the back end of the course. And to me, it looks like the 16th, the 15th, 16th, and 17th for me is a pretty good hole to putt on. So maybe when it's down to the last few holes, I putt well. I don't know. I'll have to look more into that. I don't really find that stat to be helpful at this point in time. Putting by first putt length. That is where you need to understand the best stats. So inside of 10 feet, about a third of a stroke I'm losing. 25 to 50 feet, losing about 4/10 of a stroke. 50 feet, almost pretty much on par with a 3 handicap. But where I need to improve is my ability to hit putts inside of 10 to 25 feet. And I've started to notice this on the course. I've been getting a little shaky from these distances, and I've already started to practice my 15, 20, 25, 30-foot putts, making sure I can practice my pace control and getting my speed up there. But I would agree with these stats. 10 to 25 feet, that's where I'm going to be spending a lot of my putting time, and then obviously making sure I keep those putts inside of 10 feet pretty solid. If I'm hitting balls outside of 30 feet, then the answer is get it closer to the hole. All this graph is really telling me is that maybe some of those putts from inside of 10 feet, I should probably be making a few more of those on average, but average putts per round is a really poor way to understand your putting, but it does give me some confidence to know that, hey, those 3 putts that I'm making aren't really that bad overall. And then next we're going to look at short game, which is the strongest part of my game. So compared to a 3 handicap, I am losing about 4/10 of a stroke, so a little bit less than half a stroke in my short game area. I'm gaining a stroke from offside of the green to 25 yards, and I'm equal to that 3 handicap, 25 to 50 yards. So I would expect that my short game is pretty darn good, and I'd probably say my short game and chipping is about as close to a scratch golfer. Actually, we can look at that information and we can see. Just curious. Want to know how Mr. Scratch is doing. Okay, so not as good as a scratch golfer, but somewhat close. All right. Chipping accuracy, this is one that's interesting. So from inside of 25 yards, average distance to the pin, I hit at 11 feet. The 3 handicap hits at 14 feet, so we're doing good there. Average distance to the pin from 25 to 50. For the 3 handicap, it's 22 feet. I'm inside of 20 feet, but my up and down percentage is a little bit lower. Again, that comes down to my ability to make those putts inside of 20 feet. So work on the putting, keep the chipping is good, and those numbers should be coming down. Missed green percentage, it should almost be darn near 0% from 0 to 25 yards. But just again, making sure we pick smart targets and don't miss the green from 0 to 25 yards. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good. My sand game can definitely improve. I've been working at this. You know, we talked about this in another video of mine. I'm losing about a half a stroke in the sand. So we need to work on getting the ball a little bit closer to the green with my sand accuracy, and we definitely need to work on being able to hit the greens more often from sand shots that are inside of 50 yards. So maybe that's something to look at to give myself a little bit more confidence and hit some shots in the sand, you know, from 0 to 50 yards in and try to work on that skill set. Overall, I'm super excited about this new update. I think it's going to give a tremendous amount of information to the average golfer that will give you exactly where you need to be focusing. Golf is a very specific thing to you, so what's good for you may not be good for others. And the generic advice of, oh, you need to be good with your short game is just a general idea, and like maybe you're like me and you have really good chipping, but like your putting needs to work a little bit better. Or maybe you're really good with your approach shots from 200 yards and you're decent with your approach shots from 150, but you need to work on your wedges. I think this is going to help the average golfer understand exactly what they need to be working on in their game. I think Arccos has solidified themselves as the industry leader in stat tracking with this app update. There isn't anything in the market that can beat that, period. Like, there just isn't. Pretty much everything that was outlined today is exactly what we've already uncovered. My lag putting needs to work a lot better. My putts inside of 10 feet need to get better. My sand game needs to get better. My driving penalties need to stop. And I also can get better with my wedges. So pretty much what I've already been working on. I am super excited to see how these stats improve. I will definitely give an update, but I'd love to hear what you think about just seeing this preliminary update, especially since I have so much data inside of my Arccos app. Are you using Arccos? Does this change your mind on whether or not you want to use Arccos versus another brand? Let me know in those comment sections below. I would love to hear from you all. That's really all I got for you. As always, thank you very much for watching. Deuces, people. Let's keep it moving.